Well, thank you very much. First, I want to say thanks to Uppsala University, especially to Henning, Mia, and Heidi, for this opportunity to have a reflection. In the public services, it's difficult to find some minutes to have a reflection about what we're doing every day. Mexico City, just to dimension what is the living in city, we have 700 urban social organizations every day. We have to receive, to dialogue, to build with them a lot of alternatives of public policy. Last year, for example, we have 3,000 popular mobilizations to downtown, and daily we attend almost 40, 50 tables of dialogue with these organizations. We have, for example, 500,000 vendors in Mexico City streets, 5,000 waste pickers involved in the 3,000 tons daily waste that we produce. It's a very huge city, huge problems, but Mexico, due to its demographic, political, economic, and social characteristics, as well as the presence and participation of social organization, is today a good example of the collective construction of what is known as the right to the city. In population terms, Mexico City, as the beginning at the 16th century, housed 30,000 persons. At the dawn of the 20th century, the number rose more than 500,000. We are currently more than 8.5 million inhabitants. This means that we inhabit more than 5,000 people by square kilometer. In other two states of the country, for instance, state of Chihuahua, the population density is only 14 people by square kilometer. This growth, complete with other factors, has had an impact on the pressure to gain access to the goods and services of the city, like education, housing, health, weather, transportation, and so on. In economic matters, Mexico City contributes more than any other entity to the country for the production of national wealth. It contributes with 23% of the gross domestic product. At the same time, it collects the 16% of the federal tax revenues. However, in a situation of deep fiscal inequity, it receives only 8 cents of each peso contributed to the federation by concept by stakes and federal contributions. At the same time, the capital city is not taken in count by the federal programs of local strengthening or the programs to fight poverty. Nevertheless, in spite of this unfair treatment, the capital city has the best indicators in terms of life expectancy at birth, adult literacy, as well as the indices of health and income. When performing a detailed analysis of the level of access to the rights to a healthy environment, water, housing, work, and health, among others, we can identify situations that affect the way people can exercise their rights in an urban context. Now, from the political and social point of view, Mexico has a particular political configuration. Since the colonial era, up to 1997, its regime went through various forms of government, but all of them had a constant factor, the subordination of its inhabitants in the early times to the viceroy and later to the president of the republic, who appointed a regent to rule the city. From 1928 to 1997 in particular, the city was ruled by one-party regime. The decisions about the city depended on the president, although There were some forms of guild and union participation. Its inhabitants did not have the possibility to elect their authorities. In this context of centralism and authoritarianism, its inhabitants have built a democratic and participatory culture. From diverse social movements like the teachers' movement in 1958, the movement of the medical community in 1964, the students' movement in 1968, whose main demands were political freedoms, democratic openness, public dialogue, wider and legitimate space of social participation, the protests of the popular sectors in the 80s against economic adjustment, unemployment, and the loss of the value of the salary. 1985, after one of the worst quakes in history, and due in the ineptitude of the government to face the catastrophe, society organized itself and took charge of the task to rescue the survivors and rebuild the city, highlighting the urgency of a political reform that will give the inhabitants full rights and democratically elected authorities. This strong social pressure of the citizen, as well as the new forms of social organization, sparked off the political reform of the city in 1986. So a new body of citizens' participation was created called Assembly of Representatives. This is how started an unfinished process that pretends to restore the political rights to the inhabitants so they have freely elect their authorities and take part in the decisions of the course of the city. In the 1988 federal elections, the ruling party was defeated by the leftist opposition in Mexico City, but given the fact that the law established that the presidents of the republic appoint a regente of the city, an unprecedented situation was created where a society mainly opposed to the PRI was ruled by a regent from that party with a questionable legitimacy. To face up this situation, the need arose to establish institutional changes to respond to the growing demand of democratizing the political system. In 1993, a civic plebiscite was convened by social organizations, urban movements, and political parties so the inhabitants of the capital city could elect their authorities. From the plebiscite, the federal government was pressed to put in place popular and democratic election of the authorities of Mexico City. These facts influenced the political reforms started in 1993, so it's finally culminated with the election of the head of government Mexico City, the position represented by the candidate of the Party of the Democratic Revolution, won the election in the city with 47 of the votes. 47%. Also, the legislative body of the city was formed by a majority of members of this party. So from 1997, the democratic governments of the city have an important commitment with social policies and the participation of social movements and citizens organizations. This was outlined a particular profile for the city. It has become a space of freedoms and citizens' rights with governments that have listened and have incorporated in their policies the demands of the citizens. For 15 years, the governments of the capital have established a broad system of social protection and have allocated more than 30% of the public spending to its supports. This social policy has had as overall objective to generate opportunities that allow all the people to have access to education and health services, to support the more vulnerable social groups, and to keep important subsidies for working families so they can purchase housing, for transportation, and so on. In the legislative field, important laws and reforms have been promoted by the local representatives. They have given the inhabitants of the city legal basis to expand, protect, and exercise the rights and freedoms of the people, such as the marriage between persons of the same sex, or the possibility to interrupt at will pregnancy during the first 12 weeks of gestation. Also, different laws have been homologated according to the highest standards of rights protection. It was that in that context, in 2007, we started a reflection about the right to the city. It was defined as a new human right that allows the equitable benefit of the cities. The government's acts should be based on the principles of sustainable democracy, equity, and social justice for the development of public policies. The collective right pretends that people enjoy an inclusive city where services and rights can be exercised without discrimination or exclusion due to gender, economic or social position, or any other reason. At the same time, the right to the city gives its to inhabitants legitimacy to act and to organize themselves in order to require and demand the full exercise of the right to free self-determination and to have an adequate standard of living. A promoting committee was formed to begin the talks and debate of the contents of the right to the city. It was the body in charge of this topic. It was formed by the Urban Popular Movement, CND, the International Coalition for Habitat in Latin America, the Commission of Human Rights, Ombudsman, and the government for the city. It's then when arose the idea of writing Mexico City charters for the right to the city. The process to write the charter was marked by social participation, exchange. Well, this is offices that Mexico City governmental agencies that participate in this process. No? The process to write the charter was marked by social participation, exchange of information, collective negotiation, and agreements. The process implied to divide very different ideas of the city, but consensus was achieved between social organizations and public authorities that took active part in it. On the side of the government participated more than 12 units of government. They contribute with their expertise to the development of the contents of the charter. Additionally, since 2010, a process has been promoted to involve the 16 political delegations or local municipalities in which the city is divided, so they can also contribute to the debate on this new right. The process of dialogue between civil society and governmental was made through forums with members of the academy, fairs, meetings of coordination, and follow-up, among others. The members of the promoting committee began the integration of the contents of the charter, taking in account different documents and international experience, such as the World Charter of the Right to the City, results and proposals of the first World Assembly of Inhabitants that took place in Mexico City in 2000, the diagnosis and program of human rights of the federal district, among other planning documents of the government of the city. Finally, after the collective work of analysis and discussion, Mexico City Charters for the Right to the City was publicly presented in June 13th in 2010. In that act, the current head of Government Mexico City, Marcelo Ebrard, the Ombudsman, the Legislative Assembly, the Superior Court of Justice, and the social organizations ratified their responsibility to develop actions in favor of the right to the city. It is important to point out that more than 200 organizations of very diverse nature have joined the initiative, from the urban organizations to university programs on urban sociology and studies of the city, as well as organizations of indigenous people and peasants, merchants and workers of the public street, organizations of the towns, women organizations, as well as unions, cooperatives, neighborhoods organizations, college of architects, and civil society. Mexico City Charter for the right to the city backs the transformation and construction of the city as the right and expression of the collective interest and suggests the comprehensive and articulated care of the diverse public authorities as well as the active participation of its inhabitants. The charge is arranged on the basis of the aspirations that shape the city we want: democratic, inclusive, sustainable, productive, educative, and habitable. It emphasizes the full exercise of human rights and the processes of democratizations, as well as the full fulfillment of the obligations that derive from them. The Charter is also structured on the basis of series of intersections with the above aspirations, the exercise of human rights, and 6 strategic foundations that next I will mention. The first foundation of the Charter is the full exercise of human rights in the city. It stresses the obligation of government to ensure the fulfillment and human rights without discrimination of any kind in order to guarantee dignity and collective well-being. The second foundation is based on the social function of the city, the land and the property. This core idea represents a fundamental change because on the one hand, it guarantees the right to private property, but this is not conceived as the absolute right to sign. Some limits are established at the general interest of the inhabitants and the public use. This way, should there be a conflict between private and public interest, public use will prevail. The third foundation addresses the need for democratic governance of the city. It involves citizen participation of the formulation, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the public policies. The fourth foundation refers to democratic production of the city. This is to ensure the access to the labor market of its inhabitants, in particular the youth in the urban economy. The fifth foundation refers to responsible and sustainable management of natural assets, cultural heritage, and energy goods of the city. It looks for the best environmental conditions so urban development does not occur at the expense of rural or ecological reserve areas and not to compromise future generations. The last foundation outlined by the Charter is the enjoyment of a democratic and equitable city in order to strengthen social harmony and equitable access to public spaces like squares, community centers, green areas, and so on. The main objective are to its keep and ludic and recreational life in the city. So the crossing of the strategic foundation of the Charter with the aspirations of the citizenship generates a series of guidelines and recommendations that must be observed by public entities. It is also points that actions that correspond to its inhabitants. This shows the complexity of planning, management, and administration of the city. For Mexico City, the Charter has implications and challenges in 3 important dimensions. First, the construction of a culture of the right to the city. Second, the change in the legal framework. Therefore, the third is the promotion of a constitution for the city that at the same time integrates and be based on this new right. Promoting a culture of respect, advocacy, and law enforcement of the right to the city implies that public servers should be aware, should understand, and use the principles, concepts, and the strategic foundations of the Charter in the actions of government, as well as planning of public policies. It also involves the participation of the citizens taking ownership of the Charter so they can demand that authorities obey it. In this sense, in Mexico City, different efforts are being made in order to promote the knowledge of the Charter by the public servers. There have been meetings with the servers of the political delegations so they can include in their planning actions in order to promote and guarantee the right to the city. On the other hand, last year we began processes to train the inhabitants of the colonies so citizens can take ownership of its new rights. Some actions that have helped to consolidate the right to the city in public policy are the diagnosis and the human rights program of the federal district as participative process between government institutions and civil society. Through dialogue and consensus, the condition of human rights could be identified as well as the necessary actions to move forward in their exercise and guarantee. The budget with a focus, with focus on human rights and gender that achieves to translate rights into programs and activities of government. The neighborhood improvement program is one where citizenship has a direct influence in the recovery of the public spaces of their communities, so the living conditions of the areas with the greatest social backwardness can be improved. In 2010, citizens applied directly 95 million pesos to improve supports of community centers for lighting, drinking, and urban image, as well as some other needs that they identified in their communities. Another result in the implementation of the right to the city is related with the reforms of the law of citizen participation that has broadened the forms of participation of inhabitants, nowadays in each colony to town there were citizens, committees or councils of people who have the possibility to learn and to give their opinion regarding plans, programs, projects, and action in the fields of social development, public safety, and crime prevention, economic development and employment, urban services, as well as in the fields of equality and non-gender discrimination. Another action addresses is in the right to the city is the implementation of the participatory budget. In this case, the inhabitants can decide what are the works and priority actions that they want to execute in their colonies. Therefore, the authorities of the delegations must perform the chosen programs or action. They should always respect the decision of the citizens. Also, the law development planning, as well as the law of urban development of the federal district have forms for the direct participation of the inhabitants. The second challenge is related to the change in the legal framework in order to ensure legal regulations to allow the second change is related to change in the legal framework in order to ensure legal regulations that allow to move in the implementation of the strategic foundations of the Charter expressed in public policies. In this sense, the Undersecretariat of Government and Social Organizations have made a series of proposals to reform different laws like the Housing Act, the Law of Urban Development, and the Law of Development Planning of the Federal District in order to include the principles and guarantees in the field of social production of habitat and housing and the right to the city transformed in the work of the public administration. This set of legislative reforms proposed provide a frame of reference of the action for the government in order to make it consistent with the principles of Mexico City charters of the right to the city, establish the obligation of the government to monitor and that the principles of the human rights and the right to the city be included in the elaboration of the different planning programs, consider direct democracy mechanism for the elaboration of government plans. As it has been previously pointed out, Mexico City comes from a long process of collective construction of laws and institutions that recognize the rights and freedoms of the people and the rights of the city as a collective space facing the federal powers. It is still pending the day when our city will have its own constitution as well as the other federative entities of the country. This is the third challenge that we have identified. The current state that governed is unproved by the Federal Congress. Mexico City charges for the right to the city acquires special importance in these moments when in different spaces political reforms is being under debate. This can lead Mexico City to finally have its own constitution. This will put an end to its limitations in the legislative, budgetary, political, and governmental responsibilities, as well in the restriction on the political rights of its inhabitants. Within this framework, a process of reflection and dialogue has begun with the organization in order to incorporate the rights of the people, the collective rights, and the right to the city in the dogmatic basis of this new constitution. For this purpose, a citizens' council for the political reform of the city has already been installed. It will have the task to drive reforms and below for the democratic refundating of the city. The basis for all this will be Mexico City charters for the right to the city. Thank you very much.
I'm just very happy to hear the sharing of the Mexico City and very strong to implement the Mexico Charter of City. Like given a chance, the community, the inhabitants to have the right of the city. So I just have questions to Jose Garcia that what do you think, why you are creating the Mexico City? Because it's been a long time. Like I think it's 30 years struggle before the creations of the charter in Mexico. So what do you think? Is it the political will of the government, or is it the presence of the strong social movement in Mexico that makes you also realize to create this Mexico Charter of the City? And then the second is, how do you see as a political leader the significance of this approach in your city? And the third is, as local authority, how do you balance your role to this charter? Are the civil society plays more role to implement this Mexico Charter of City, or because I think you need more people to really implement the different right that been stated in the Charter of the City. But how do you ensure that it was being felt in the ground, and how you ensure that the violence was not there for the inhabitants? That's all. Thank you.
There's a lot of, as I said at the beginning of my speech, a lot of civil society organizations in Mexico City, not only about Mexico City problems or demands or struggles, even all around the whole country, because it's a capital. And but this process of reflection and to all these organizations always thinks and always demand spaces to dialogue or to put these demands on the table. For that reason, we have a lot of councils. Every public agency has a civil society council when participates different organizations involved in this issue. There are a strong participation in Mexico City. That's why we introduce this debate about the right to the city in order to organize these demands and to promote that the public service and the servers use these principles in this everyday work.
Thank you. We now have a few minutes that you exchange.